or something that would resemble bagpipes.
Yeah, Greeks have some as well.
There's a lot. I think there's many. Air Legion. Evidently, a lot of people learned how to play a song out of a stomach.
A sheep's stomach, wasn't there?
Then they eat
Lungs
it.
of the stomach.
Then they fill it with and then they eat it because the bagpipes. Otherwise, they related to the haggis.
They have to hunt them in October.
People who tune into YouTube. People who just tune into YouTube
This week in
bagpipes. What just happened? People, I tuned in.
We're selling.
The first thing was
we're selling a CD of songs of the stomach. Get 50 CDs for $29.95.
Yeah, exactly.
The new model with MIDI is incredible.
Oh, back to you, Alex.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are on YouTube and you look down, you'll see a link to Zoom. You can actually join the conversation. If you're watching here and you're trying to put comments into YouTube, don't. No, we're not looking at those. The Makana is the place to go, and where you can find a link to Makana in Zoom. So anyway, welcome over there. But you're more than welcome to watch on YouTube. If you are here and you're wondering how did all these people end up in this panel, how were they picked? They showed up. They showed up early, and they've been able to weary the storm of being on the panel. If you want to be here, you got to be here by 6:40 Pacific Standard Time. We start mic check somewhere between 6:40 and 6:43. We open the doors before 6. It kind of ranges somewhere between 5:30 and 6. The doors open, and we start figuring our stuff out and having tea and coffee and just kind of chit chatting. I can't promise anything until 6:40, and then all I can promise is a mic check. And we do the mic checks to make sure that everything looks and sounds good for the show at 7 o'clock. 7 and this week it's a holiday here in the United States, and people are both coming and going. So we're the show is. No, we're just doing general question and answer from 7 to 9 this week. Normally we have different second hours, but this week we're going to have general questions, except for Saturday, which will still be focused on education. So anyways, that's what we're working on here. If you are, the best thing to do is ask questions early. Even though we've got 2 hours to answer them, there's a lot of questions, and we'll run out. As we work through these. And so it's your job as an attendee. I know you thought you were just going to be able to sit here and listen, but it's your job not only during the show, but all day. So think about questions. Think about things you don't know about media production, virtual production, and write them down. This is your homework. This is your duty to the group. I don't know why I made it so heavy. So anyway, but it's a great place to ask questions. Again, as I keep on telling everyone, this is the group here represents centuries of knowledge that you are able to tap quickly and learn fast. So anyway, Bill, I suppose that we have some questions floating around.
We do have some questions, thank goodness. The first one comes from A. Mitchells of Washington, who is a frequent contributor to our question queue. How do people feel about, pardon me?
Thank you, A. Mitchells.
Yes,
he's
always early and thoughtful, and this one will be thoughtful too. How do people feel about sweat equity in terms of projects or productions or companies and product development? At what point do you feel it begins, and at what point and what might be some expectations of returns on said sweat equity? He notes this also relates to work for exposure or work for access, but it's mainly about sweat equity itself.
Go ahead, Mickey.
All right, you want to hand over to Con next?
Yep, we'll do. Not a very good answer, Mickey. I just want to say it was a good pose, but that was not at all the answer I was expecting. This is always a tricky business. Sweat equity is always a tricky thing to talk about. I will say that I got into almost everything that I've ever gotten into by starting off doing it for free. So I think that's kind of the model, and I think that there's a lot of people that I've seen. And I've said this before, there's people that I've seen that will wait and say, well, I haven't gotten a job for that yet, so I'll figure it out, or I'll get into that when someone pays me to do it, or they want to know what their hourly is immediately, and all these other bits and pieces. And I've said this before, that, free is the straw that drank 1,000 milkshakes, there's a lot to say for people who want to if you want to get into a certain area, you do what you need to do to get in. That said, it's not like I do it all the time. I do it in areas that I want to get into this specific thing. I'm still managing. It has to fit inside of me managing my financial needs. I don't just, I don't bend over sideways to do something for free that is, I don't I think that where people get themselves in trouble is they keep on thinking something's going to turn out on the other end, and if they just do one more free job or whatever. But a lot of times I will take on, especially a new area. I don't know how to do that yet, so I'll go down that path because I'm interested in it, and it paid off for me many times. Go ahead, Greg, and then Bill.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I did so much free stuff when I was starting out too. But the other thing is that in the world of grant writing and arts projects and stuff like that, a lot of times you're expected to, in your application, put in a certain amount of donations of in-kind services. In other words, your sweat equity into the project so that you can actually get some money.
Yep.
So there's that avenue too.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill.
I think about it in terms of the word equity. So that's kind of a synonym for value. And so the question is, you're providing value for somebody else, normally for no money. What is the value to you? And I just think you need to think about that. I've gotten involved in projects that were really no good for me, and I wasn't learning something that I really wanted to continue with. So those have less value to me than something that I am interested in, and I think I'm building my reservoir. Now, sometimes it's just a matter of being on a set is its own equity for you to learn the norms of being on a set, and that can be hugely valuable and really advance your career. But for me, if I'm going to put value into something for someone else, I want some value that I know, and that means I need to know what my goals are in my career.
I mean, I will say that I always know my angle out of something. Like I always know it. Like I never go into something without an angle, and I will win almost every single time in the way that I decided in my head that this was worth it. So, for instance, I think it cost me. My wife pointed this out. It cost me about $800 to work for the NFL for a day. So for a day or two or whatever, it cost me $800 because I had to fly there. Then I had to put, put myself. It was supposed to be a local whatever. There's a whole bunch of costs that were my costs, and then I got paid for as basically as a and slightly better than an intern to work on something where I basically just ran errands. But what I got to see was a big production, and for me, a production, I see a lot of big productions, but I hadn't seen a game, and I hadn't seen the build up, and I hadn't seen the process, and I hadn't seen, a bunch of things that I was interested in. And so it was an opportunity that came up, and I was willing to spend into it because you can't go to school for that. And so there's things like that I look at that, and the NFL wasn't, they were looking for someone local. I just happened to know that it had happened. So I jumped in and said, I'll do that, and it won't cost you anymore, and so it was, those are the kind of things that I look for are opportunities where I'm going to, learn a lot, in that process. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Courtney.
One thing I learned as a musician is a lot of people want you to do it for the exposure. And so I learned that you got to put some rules on for yourself. So what I have as a rule, as a musician or anything, if I'm doing something pro bono or free or whatever you want to call it, I pretty much say I'll do up to 2 events for free, unless I'm convinced that this is something that's really beneficial in some way, shape, or form. So that way I have a set of rules. So if somebody comes up to me and I can weigh it, saying, if I'm going to be spending a lot of my money on this, is this worth it to me? So those rules in place, good idea.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you should know that if you're looking for a job in a very competitive business or desirous business where a lot of people are trying to break in, that there are a lot of producers, Corbin, that trade on sweat equity, and they will only ever hire people at very low or entry level or minimum wage, if whatever they can get away with, because that's how they produce stuff for a certain market. And you can look at it as a way to get some exposure, like Jeffrey said. It might be a good way to do that, but if you're ever expecting to get higher paying jobs out of that same person that hired you for the sweat equity, probably don't count on that, because they will always look at you as, well, we can get that guy for minimum wage, let's hire him. So if you just need it for the exposure, it's a good way to go.
And education too. I mean, you learn a lot.
Yeah, but the problem is there's so many people, well, at least in the entertainment business, that are competing for those those positions, you're quickly weeded out if you don't know what you're doing. But
no, but I mean that even then, I mean, just doing the reps. There's so many things that you just need to do the reps on. You know, I know I have a friend of mine who's a camera operator right now, and he took a job that isn't. I mean, he's not donating his time, but he's not getting paid what he normally gets paid to do what he does. And he just said, but the thing is that I'm getting pushed harder than I've ever been pushed before. You know, like he got into a position by taking that lower rate. He got into a position that he doesn't normally get to, you know, as a lead camera, and he's just getting jacked around all over the place, but not in a bad way. People are nice, and you know, it's easy if you're a nice producer that is easy on people, knowing that you're getting them for less, you get a lot more out of them. Anyway, but he said the reps that he's getting are so powerful because he gets to do a lot of things that he wasn't normally able to do because he was kind of in a box. So one of the ways you use this of working for less or working for nothing, usually less is where you want to try to go to, is angling yourself into a place that you want to go, that you're not there yet. And so you use that discount to undercut, to be honest with you, other people who would charge the full rate, but they're already there. And so you're trying to get into that position, you know. And for me, my whole life has been one big tank track, you know, like my whole life has been with a couple crashes, but I always have something that I'm doing that pays the bills, something that I'm trying to dump out the back because I'm not interested in it anymore, and something that I'm interested in the front that isn't paying yet. And so my whole life since I was, you know, 15 years old has been that tank track of I'm trying to I have something that I'm sitting on right now that pays what I need it to pay. There's something that I'm pushing out, and then there's something that's coming in that I'm interested in. And that thing that I'm interested in, I'm doing for less or free or whatever, because that's the next thing for me. And then as it moves in, it becomes the thing, and then there's something new, you know, like, and I always thought that someday I'll get to a point where I'm just happy where I'm at, and it's not going to happen. Now, it doesn't mean that I change companies or I change anything else. I just change what I'm doing. So for the company, I'm changing that focus of the kind of work that I'm bringing in, you know, or what we're doing. So it's not a matter of changing positions. It's just changing your focus. But what I'm always scared of is when I see people like leave their job to go do something else. That's more faith, more stepping out into the void than I usually do. Alex, and then Roscoe, and then Bill, and then we'll move on.
I think the danger is make sure that you're working. Firstly, it's sometimes better to work for free than for a lower rate, because then they know what rate you're able to support yourself on. But if you're free, people can't really expect you to work for free forever, although they'll ask you to. But then essentially, at some level, they owe you a little bit if you do it for free.
Yep.
You also can consider it in terms of it's a bit like going to a conference that you have to pay to go to and nobody knows you. I mean, I went to Apple WWDC in 1990 and 1991 because I was interested in user interface design, and I thought maybe I might be able to meet some interesting people. It didn't turn out, but I had a great time, and you never know how these investments are going to go. That's the sweat equity we're talking about. And the important thing for us all to realize is middle-class white males of a certain age is that we can afford to do it. So this is part of the privilege that we have to recognize, is the fact that lots of people who have supported their parents, loving parents, or wherever they happen to be in society, that they can afford this sweat equity thing. And we have to look around us to see if there's other people we can support and help who don't have that.
I call that, by the way, I call that opportunity debt. So when you have a lot of opportunity in your life, there's a debt that you're building up, you know, karmically, you know, of that. So I don't call it as much privilege. You know, I don't know. I find it more, it's easier for me to think about. And so a lot of the work that I do around the world is because I have a lot of opportunity that, you know, I was born into an immense amount of opportunity. You know, not as much as like, you know, crazy money, but very intelligent parents who raised me well, you know, that, you know, taught me how to work hard and taught me how to do a lot of things, and put me in a good position. Stayed together, all those things that are the things that give you a lot of, and then I'm, you know, white, you know, and so there's a lot of opportunity that I get, and then I just keep in the back of my head, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that I built up a debt that I need to constantly think about how to pay down. Anyway, go ahead, Roscoe, and then Bill.
Education can only take you so far, and then initiative has to take over. My greatest example is a guy that volunteered his time named Tom Moore, currently cutting blue bloods, I believe. Came and gave a talk because he was married to the person at the college that did IT purchasing, and I just happened to hear about it. A kid sitting in that class named David Crabtree heard the lecture, got motivated, went up and found out how to use this software called Avid, And it was up at a home shopping network, had an Avid machine. We didn't have them at the university. We couldn't afford them. And he cut overnight his own work on the Avid. 3 years later, he's working on a show called NYPD Blue. Yeah. And currently right now, I'll put up his thing in the IMDb, but he showed initiative. So he worked for free, but he knew exactly where he was going with that knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, when Nick Jesserson, who sometimes is able to get here now, I mean, there was any weird project that came into my head, Nick was like, hands up. Like, I want to play. He's now the head of visual effects at Drexel University because he learned a lot in that process, is that every time I said, oh, I got this crazy idea, it doesn't have any money, because I have a whole thing that I just pay people. I will pay whatever there is to pay if I'm making money. Like, I don't do this whole thing like, and if I'm not making any money, then I say, I don't got a budget, so I'm doing it for free. If you want to play, you can. So he would always raise his hand. I kind of have a very like delineation in my head about that. But he would raise his hand on all my crazy ideas, and he learned a lot. I learned a lot, and now he's done well. I'm sure he can talk about it at some point. Bill.
I have a thing in my head that I've for a long time called rate pinning, and this has seemed to be a truth that has worked throughout my career, which is that if I say it's $1,000 for me to do this, and they say, well, it's charity and I'm a friend and blah blah blah, so I lower it to $400. I become pinned as the $400 guy. You never get pinned at what you were originally. And every time you cut your rate, it kind of changes the marketplace's perception of what you do things for. So what I started to do is saying, I'm going to go ahead and bill you $1,000, and then I'm going to cut you a check for $800 because I think you're great and I love your charity or whatever. And asking them to do that means that your rate always stays $1,000. And it also is easier to deduct a charitable donation check to a legitimate charity for the $800 that was the difference between my actual rate and what I'm going to do it for my friend for.
So you're cutting the check to go back to the
I
charity,
literally
or go
have
back
cut
to the company?
checks to clients back. I say, you give me your check for the $1,000. I'm going to give you a check, a donation to your charity in the amount that's the difference. And then I have a lovely little thing for the IRS that says I donated this much to a 501c3 charity, and I can at least deduct it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Greg.
And you don't cancel the check?
That's fantastic. That's a great angle, Bill. That's a really great angle. The other thing for me is I've never altered my rate. My rate stays the same. If I want to make a deal, I alter the time.
Right.
So that there's never any discrepancy in the rate.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. Doug.
Yeah, well, I've done exactly what Bill did just on our last show. It was a fundraising event for a nonprofit. And during the show, we gave a live donation, and I billed the company exactly what our rate is. But, I mean, we gave it right back.
Yep, that's great. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, and another thing you can do is what I'll do is have, especially commercial things, is donate to like Glide. Write my check to Glide. They get the write-off, I get experience, and money goes to where it needs to go.
Next question.
All right, moving on. Actually, this one appears to be for me directly. For panelist Bill, what are you using for your background and backlight? This is easy. That's an old Savage pop-up, one of the spring out backgrounds that I've had probably since 1985. And for the light, I use this little beast, and this is, the brand is G1S. It came off of Amazon, and it's an RGB colored LED light emitter. So that's the whole rig.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I asked that because I've been trying to get that color out of my rig, and it just won't get that dark blue. I love that color. Admittedly, part of that may be the fact that I'm using a very different background. I've got a tobacco Lastolight.
Yeah, the reflectance.
Sorry, Alex, they were out of the gray ones. But yeah.
Next question.
Okay, moving on to
Mickey. You were going to say. Sorry, Mickey. You were going to say one thing real quick.
Yeah, I think I don't know if how much control you have with your exposure there, John. But if you could, because right now I think your key is a little too hot for you. So I think if you dial that down, you might get if you dial down the exposure on your camera, your backlight might appear a bit more like a darker blue. Like keep the key as is earlier, like not brighter, but dial down the exposure of the camera instead.
Something to play with. Next question.
Okay, moving to Greg's question from the panel. Greg heard it. It's an audio question. Mickey, what OS are you running for Pro Tools? Have you been able to get past Mojave? Note, how do you deal with picture?
Yeah, I guess I don't have to raise my hand. I'm still on Mojave on all my all my work machines. 2 or 3 weeks ago, when Pro Tools 2020.11 was released, they added back some more support for additional codecs, especially QuickTime codecs that are wrapped in QuickTime files, that MOV files. Specifically for Catalina, but it's still not there yet. So I'm sticking to Mojave until better support comes out.
This is a challenge. Go ahead, Greg.
No, I think it's quite odd that we have to be 3 versions behind, on our OS to stay working.
Here's the challenge: is that there's a lot of shortcuts that people write, especially when they're doing cross-platform development, that they write because it'll work on both platforms, and they don't want to write only to the Mac OS, and the problem that they have is Apple's now accelerating. And we've seen this a bunch of places. Adobe's having this problem. Avid's having this problem. There's other
Avid's
companies.
Always had that problem.
Avid's always had this problem. And so because they're doing a whole bunch of stuff where they want to write their own controllers and they want to write all their own stuff, and they don't want to for the companies like QLab, like that who just set down on the code base of the platform that they're on. They're accelerating with the OS, whereas a Playback Pro is a good example of someone who wrote all their own, rolled their own everything, and they're just slowly fading away, because they can't keep up with. They have to rewrite all the code, and so the problem is Pro Tools and Premiere and a bunch of other apps, Photoshop and After Effects, really need to be rewritten. Like they just need to rewrite them all the way from the scratch, and they have to think about this is what Apple did. Is they, for Final Cut, they rewrote everything, basically all the new code, and they rethought everything while they did it. And not everybody agreed, but they built a modern architecture, and so that allows them to keep running forward in a way that they're not going to be able to. That other companies are going to continue to have a hard time doing if they're rolling their own code. And so, and I think that it's going to be really interesting to see what happens as we move forward, because the M1 chips are going to force it as a creative. Unless something dramatic happens on the PC side, I don't see any creatives buying anything other than M1 or M-based chips. Anyone who really wants that performance, because the performance that we're hearing is just insane. I'm going to buy a bunch of Mac Minis, and we'll see. I'll either be really happy or very unhappy soon. But I think for creatives, it's going to be really hard to argue against that if the performance keeps on going up, because the OS is built to support them. And as a result, though, the manufacturers or the software developers are going to really have a hard time, because if they keep falling behind, creators will start eventually figuring out something else to use. Jeff, and then Greg, and then Alex.
Yeah, I have one machine, 2016 MacBook running Mojave, running a fairly modern Pro Tools. I have another machine that is a 2010 original cheese grater running 10.9, running Pro Tools 11. And basically, once you install it and it works and the bugs are gone, you don't touch it. It doesn't update. So I'm basically waiting to see when we get maybe the M2 chip with Pro Tools running on it, and I'll just leapfrog to that when we upgrade. So it's a every 3 to 5 year upgrade everything, rather than a systematic.
And the question is, at some point, do you get to a situation where you go, well, maybe I should just move to Resolve or Logic or something? Does it get to a point where it's just not worth it to stick with the older software? Go ahead, Greg, and then Alex.
Well, see, I'm going to spend pretty much of my. My school is done. This is exam week, so I'm going to spend most of my Christmas vacation time trying to dive into Fairlight and see what the capabilities are there.
I'm going to really be curious about your input on it, because I'm talking to some folks that are doing a lot of audio engineering, and they're super excited about it.
It seems like a really, really hot ecosystem. The whole thing combined. So. You know, because there's problems with Premiere, there's problems with this and that, and you know, so I don't know. We'll see.
Yep. Go ahead, Alex, and then Mickey.
I'm going to be interested in seeing what NVIDIA do, because NVIDIA have got their own walled garden and they've got Adobe to buy into it at a certain time. And Adobe essentially have got in with them, and NVIDIA want to buy Acorn. What are they called? The Acorn RISC machines. ARM, that's it. So maybe they might create the Pro platform and their drivers will actually run on different operating systems. I mean, that's the only thing you could really do if you're a PC user, is hope NVIDIA sort out what Microsoft can't do.
Yeah, and I think the hard part is that without control of the OS, it becomes really hard. It's just a hard lift. It's a hard lift no matter what. But without really control over the OS and the entire ecosystem, it becomes a really difficult thing. Not impossible. And I think a lot of PC users, I mean, I think that it's starting to really sink in how fast these chips are. And I think people are starting to try to figure out what to do. I've talked to a couple folks that are thinking about it pretty hard. Mickey?
Yeah, just in terms of Fairlight, it's definitely something I've been playing around with for the past few weeks during my spare time, and like it's getting there. Not yet.
So what's missing?
High-end automation tools. That's not there yet. High-end editing tools. I mean, they're touting the, for example, they're touting the smart tool, essentially, Pro Tools. They're touting that they have a tool similar to Pro Tools Smart Tool, and that's been around for like 15 years. So, I mean, looking at their progress throughout the past 3 years, it's like moving really fast, but not quite there yet. We need the whole ecosystem of tools surrounding audio production, like conforming tools such as Ediload or Conformalizer, and also like say sound effects library tools like SoundMiner. Until that's there, I wouldn't use it as my day-to-day DAW, but it's moving really fast, and Avid needs a serious competition in terms of post sound. They need competition because we're paying them too much for such slow development.
Right. Very good. Next question.
Moving on to Guy Cochran from the panel in here in Seattle, or up there in Seattle, using a nanlite mix panel and just got a dmxking USB adapter. What software on the Mac should we be looking at for control?
I've been using hardware controllers. I mean, I haven't been using a Mac-based controller, so I don't know of what to use yet. It's something that's on my. Oh, go ahead, Benjamin.
Sure. So, limited experience on Mac. Again, I also usually am very familiar with the EOS system by ETC, but I've been using QLab. If you already have a QLab license, it's definitely worth a quick check. 16 addresses free, so worth a quick check for a simple light. I've also seen other free macOS DMX controllers, as long as the dmxking is compatible. I know there's been some challenges with that.
And I was like, okay, there we go. Very well done. All right, John.
I'm installing DMX. This red light back here is DMX. The best software for the Mac that I found, Guy, is LightKey. And you can do like, I don't know, 24 channels or something for free, so you can play with it, and it's really good on the Mac.
And Benjamin, with the QLab, you can buy the lighting license to get more channels. Is that right?
Correct. It's 16 addresses free and up to the full span of ArtNet or SACN with a paid license, similar to the audio and video licenses available for QLab that have been around for a while. And if you have the Pro bundle anyway, lighting comes included.
That's perfect. Thanks. Next question.
Moving on. Well, Paul Wallace actually has kind of a follow-up. He wants to show, he says, show us how nanlite works and go over the different types and sizes.
So I have two nanlites right now that are up right now. These are not DMX controlled. I take them with me. No, I was testing them for remote stuff. So I do take a nanlite with me when I'm travel, but this is what I'm using right now are two of the compact slim 100Bs, and they're pretty big. They're like 24 by 15 or something like that. The 200s are unwieldy; they're too big, and then the 68s are pretty good. And that's probably what I would get if I'm just right up against it. I was testing those yesterday, so I'm testing the 100s, which are a little bit bigger. Then there's 40s and 25s. The ones we send out are the mixed panel or the Luma pads. They have a whole bunch of lines. So nanlite has a whole bunch of lines of stuff, but the Luma panel 25, I think, is the one we actually send out with kits. It's smaller, easier to put up, and then the mixed panels are the ones that really are the workhorses, and that's what I have in my home studio. And those have DMX control, but they also have a ton of other programming and lots of other controls to them. So they've got a lot more processing. So they come in different, and then there are some kind of Fresnel based ones as well that I use. I actually bounce them in my home studio as well off of a reflector or off a diffuser. So there's a couple different lines of nanlite. So it's not a nanlite. It's a company that makes like Aperture or someone else that makes a whole line of them. I think that we found that they're kind of price, durability, ease of use, all of those things together has kind of been the trifecta for us of what we found worked. And I've used a lot of different lights, and they sent some out for me to test, and then I was like, oh yeah. So we bought a lot of nanlites at this point. And so for this kind of thing, that's what I use. I don't know if anyone else has any other input. Guy, you've got a couple there that you're playing with.
Yeah, we're building out a small little area in our studio to do these presentations. And so I have the mixpanel 150, which is pretty good size. And then the DMX in the back. When I bought that dmxking, I did have a little gotcha there. I didn't buy like anything high end. I just saw in that church front Excel doc. I'll put it in the chat, but he recommended it. And it's a 3-pin, like a standard XLR connector, and on the back of the nanlite's a 5-pin. Right. So already I'm running into like these gotchas in addition to just not figuring out what software would be quick and easy because they're going up pretty high, and I don't want to obviously go up there and mess with them. But I also have the Wi-Fi option, but I want to be able to repeat this show. Like switch it. If somebody else comes in with one look one day, I want to be able to switch it to my look the next day.
Yeah, and I'm working on collecting. It sounds like we got a couple experts here in the group, but I am going to work on a DMX second hour in the next couple of weeks, so we can all just trade notes, because I think that I'm trying to figure it all out too. I mean, the thing that I'm trying to figure out right now is a way to do IP-based DMX that doesn't saturate the network. So I don't want it to keep talking. I just want it to send updates. And so go ahead, Benjamin, and then Paul.
Oh. Just real quick, again, limited experience, but what I've found is when we're doing DMX-based show control networks, when we try to put any other traffic aside from ArtNet or SACN on that network, you're going to decrease reliability significantly. And I'm eager to find ways to see what packet-based communications allow.
Yeah, and right now the best way that I'm getting around it, or not getting around it yet, it's not working yet, is to set calls that are happening, because I'm not trying to do it over an event network. I'm trying to do it over the internet. And so I want to be able to do a DMX control of a light 3,000 miles away. Go ahead, Benjamin, and then we'll go back to Paul.
So just real quick, the folks at Limonel who are making ZoomOSC are working on Streamweaver, which seems to be exactly what you want. It's specifically a program to control remote DMX addresses. You have a booth computer, so to speak, and the people on the other end just receive your DMX.
That's awesome. Yeah, because that's exactly, and that's the approach that I've been kind of taking in my head was figuring out how to just send the commands over there and have something else managing it in on the other side, but not trying to manage it directly, because that hasn't worked great. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Paul.
So Benjamin, you're in high school. Dude.
You fit right in. That's all we're saying. That's all Mickey said. Welcome to the crew. Like we're you're proof that we don't need centuries of experience. Just a couple really hard years, it appears. So good. It's good to have you.
Lots of curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul.
Yeah, I'll second that. Excellent answers from everyone. And Benjamin, I just got a nanlite. It's really tiny. It's
what do you think of that? I have one of those.
I like it because I've got a metal desk, and it just clamps right on anywhere I want to throw it. I just clamp it onto metal, and it here, let me turn it on. It's
got a magnetic back to it. It also it's got a battery in it, so you can kind of charge it up and post it somewhere. I've been looking at using
store it with your memory cards.
This is what it looks like. I mean, I can put it up here.
It's a little sourcey. I mean, that's the thing I was trying to figure out. Yeah.
And it's got this. I can add this to it too. But
even with that, it's all
I just clipped it right on my desk. It's a metal desk, so I can put it anywhere. It's really neat.
What's the next question?
Moving on, Philip Oler comes up next, and his question out of Katona, New York, is certainly there must be a way to capture the output of a USB webcam not using a computer. If not, what are the technological reasons this isn't being done? I need to split the webcam into a computer and a capture device for commercial production. Thanks.
Go ahead, John. Pruitt.
If you're technologically inclined, you can use an Arduino. I think the main problem is that a Raspberry. Well, that's a computer, so I'm trying to get away from a computer, per his instructions. But why I think the issue is, and the people on the panel can correct me on this, is that USB signal isn't equivalent to the HDMI signal. So you're going to need some sort of thing to both provide power to the camera and interpret the signal coming out of the webcam and do the translation. So that's the reason why you're not seeing a lot of that stuff. I wish there was, because I would get a Brio and plug it into my ATEM Mini right now.
Go ahead, Jason, and then Benjamin.
I think the answer is really simple. A webcam is not a camera. It's an encoder with a lens. That's all there is to it.
Yep. Benjamin?
Just real quick, if you really were going down that route, I'd be really excited to see something hacked together. Happy to chat offline about it, but something about a USB serial converter might be in there.
Yeah, Richard Hall has been experimenting with it. He's got a Raspberry Pi that he's connected a webcam to and then output. It's not working yet, but it's close. There's video, but there's little issues, and he's kind of working through it. So he's not here today, but we're watching his. We're riding along with him as he works through it. The one camera that will provide that solution is the Huddle Cam HD. It has both HDMI out and USB out at the same time. So you don't, and I believe I haven't ever tried to do both at the same time, but Guy, it'll output both. So you can have.
Yeah, absolutely. It is both at the same time. I usually have it hooked up to my fish tank just to be able to do this demo. In fact, if you don't mind, I'll bring it in like tomorrow or something like that, and we'll do both.
Absolutely. So that's the one place where you can get both of those signals at the same time. Is out of the Huddle Cam HD, which is a little more expensive than the Brio. It's I think $299, but it's a cool little camera, and it does a lot of other things that a lot of other cameras don't. Next question.
Moving on to Adam Taylor of Providence, I presume Rhode Island. Does Office Hours use ZoomOSC? Have any panelists use it on a gig for clients?
Grant, I didn't even wait.
Not yet.
Okay.
I know. Yeah, not yet. I've downloaded it and just haven't got it racing yet. But it looks very promising, and they've just done an update, and there's some very cool things.
Coming back to Benjamin.
Sorry, you're hitting on all my knowledge.
That's good. You're good answers.
Thanks. So I've played around with ZoomOSC a little bit. As best I can tell, it is the idea is there. The execution is almost there. They're missing one key feature, which is multi-pin and multi-spotlight. And as soon as that comes along, I expect there to be a whole wave of folks who are really interested in using it. But until then, I think the primary really useful parts of it will be the remote control of presenter computers. So you can chat specialized messages as long as you're a host or co-host, and you can control their microphone and video on and off from a control computer.
Yeah, one of the hard things with Zoom is actually its tendency to rearrange who's where, and so that makes it really hard to make that calculation. Like with Hangouts, we built a lot of tools for Hangouts, backends that would tie into it, but it was always you were dealing with 1 through 10. Like you just you're making a call to that location, not to that person. And so with Zoom, where there's so many more people, and that it tends to rearrange people. It doesn't have that. I don't think that it does. I guess it does have a unique ID for everybody coming in, but I don't know if that's as useful. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Sure. One of the best features of version 3.0, I believe, was that you can actually now identify people by their names. So you needn't look at their gallery view ID. You can actually you can refer to mute and unmute and all of those sorts of things by their name or a substring of their name.
That's great. Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Moving on to John Pruitt from the panel in Huntsville, Alabama. What's the best placement for an over-the-ear mic like many of the panelists use?
Go ahead, John.
I'm not in Alabama, Bill.
I'm sorry. Huntersville. I thought it saw it as Huntsville. I apologize.
So the big thing is that mine's a little back today, but you basically want to make sure. I usually tell people that I want it to be about a half an inch behind the corner of my mouth. So this is pretty close to it right now. I'm tapping on it, but they're just behind the corner of your mouth. There's a tendency when you pull it back, obviously you're giving up some of the physics that you were getting from it, and you pull it forward and you'll start hearing your breath, and definitely anywhere near the plane like this, that's your nose, is where you want to avoid so you don't hear breathing. And so that's what you're really trying to do, is kind of get it. And then it's just less noticeable. Like you don't want to be up high or low. So those are that's generally the rule. The rule of thumb is just a little bit behind this corner is usually where I put it anyway. Mickey?
Yeah. Typically, I follow what Alex is saying, but I would have the person smile so that you actually get a more complete image of how far back you should go. And also, one really key thing is you don't want the actual capsule touching the face.
Yeah. Because
once it's touching the face, you get the resonance of the voice through the person's skull and to.
And is it true? Is it true that this little rubber thing is really there as a spacer? You put it where it touches the skin. Okay, that's
yes.
So there's a little rubber piece that almost nobody knows what it does. And really, where I put that is right where this hits my face. I roll that little piece of rubber and I think it's designed to reduce the vibration that's there. I don't know if it really makes that much because it's touching a lot of my face. I don't know if anyway, but the goal is that for it to take some of that vibration out. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Alex, show also how to bend the mic. That was very key, that when you reach back there and show them exactly how and where.
Yeah. So the way I describe it when I'm showing people, this one's bent to where I want it, and it's an expensive mic, so I don't want to bend it over and over again. You want to do it as few times as you can. But the way I describe it is you want to take your thumb and you put it right below your ear, right in the front. Put your thumb here, and then you take your two fingers here and you grab it and just pull it out, and you're gonna bend it right at that point, just enough to get it out there. But it's not like if you grab onto it and start pulling it, you're going to end up with a wrinkly little thing that comes out. You can do one move, and that is thumb in like this. I have to train this a lot. I do this online a lot over Zoom. Thumb in, take these two fingers and grab on the inside and just pull out a little bit until it's away from your face. And that any other way to do it tends to crumple it up. Go ahead, Jeff.
That little rubber ring also keeps sweat from getting down to the element.
Oh, okay. There you go. Very good. All right. Next question.
Right after I apologize to the entire state of North Carolina for moving Huntersville out of there, I will move on to the next question. And this is from Grant on the panel. And Grant says, PowerPoint with talking head picture-in-picture pre-recorded presentations for on-demand viewing. He wants to record in the cloud. Discuss how you would do it.
Well, the problem, it's the whole recording in the cloud part that's the hard, because it's perfectly done with the rooms right now. Go ahead, Benjamin.
One of my other favorite tools right now is called mmhm.app, mmhmm.app. A real quirky one, but it seems to have some kind of interactive recording aspect where you can put some slides behind you and it'll do some kind of intelligent keying of your background. And I see Dave in Mukana also mentions PowerPoint is a good move. And it's just, I was thinking, it just came out of beta, so this might be an interesting one.
Yeah, I think that my problem is I don't like people in front of their slides. So that's been my challenge, is does exactly what I don't want to do. And so, but for folks who like it, I think it's great. And I think if you don't have another tool and you want to be, in there, I like to cut back and forth a lot, and sometimes use a picture-in-picture, but I like to keep moving it around. And I think that's, especially in a post-production, that's what you want to do. I guess, Grant, I would think about having two Zooms join a Zoom and then having one soloing on the person talking. Can you do that when in a screen share? Have one soloing and then one on a thing, but having rooms work in the cloud would be really great. That's all I got to say.
There's a few of us working on it now. Tucker's working on it as well. And we've tried a few things. Tried Windows 10, like the AWS workspaces runs Windows 10 with the NVIDIA, like the graphics one. And nope, it just won't. It just will not run.
Yeah.
So
can you do that though? Can you have two different Zoom rooms jump in and then one gets the screen share? And can the other one solo it?
Sorry, you can't,
because you can't get the full screen of the person.
With a room, you can't. When there's screen share, it has to be on. So if you've only got one screen in the Zoom room, then it'll be the screen share. So
and you have to do it in the cloud.
Always something.
You don't have to do it in the cloud, I guess, or you want to.
I've got 100 to do, and so
at the same time.
Well, yeah. So we just talked about we're going to do it as a boot camp. So we'll do it in a week, and we're thinking we can do it with 4 people, and we'll just have 4 setups. Now, if I can do that all in the cloud, then they can all stay home. That's what I'm thinking.
Right.
So, but there's a few different ways. One, Jeff's got, obviously, he's got a bag of tricks that could do it. But I was thinking about live stream studio even, but vMix as well. All of those will do it, and could just use standard Zoom meetings, and not the Zoom room. But I'd love to use rooms because then we can remote control that too. So
right, absolutely. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then John.
So what I like to do with picture-in-picture is I'd like to get the actual talking head picture bigger than the presentation picture, which is kind of tough. But Prezi came out with a new version of Prezi, which gives you, it's like Prezi Video is what it's called. And what it does is it does overlays to their regular presentation style, which is this moving from slide to slide type situation. And with that allows an area for the presentation to show up. It only takes up that part of the line, so you can put in the text and try and keep the text as little as possible always. But it's a little bit more interactive and a little bit more fun than just a basic small little picture on the bottom corner.
The thing to remember is that so I've experimented with, over the last 20 years doing training, I've experimented with a lot of different ways of doing this and it failed in some of them and succeeded in others. I had one where I had literally a hand would come out of a green screen and point to things. I just to try to make it fun and do all a bunch, we just did tons of labs on this. And I guess the thing that I came up with that I just settled into was that there's an important thing about editing, and that is that it's something that you do that's violent to the brain. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but in our day-to-day thing, nothing changes, right? Everything always, if things are doing something like your edit, there's something wrong with you, and so it tends to wake the brain up a little bit to have those things happening. So cutting, like when you put a pip down there, then you go back to nothing changing, and what your brain starts to do is it starts just to ignore things, and it just becomes a slow data again. So the cutting itself, the edit itself, is part of the keeping people awake and keeping people engaged, is actually changing the image a lot, is part of the puzzle. Slides by themselves are horrible. And a lot of what we're doing is that we're perpetuating what salespeople and scientists and academics think of that as a good idea. And none of it's a good idea. Like none of it was boring when we were doing it in the same room, and it's worse online, and the pip doesn't help. Like what helps is really understanding, whether it's PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever, Keynote's easier to do it in, is animations and things popping up and only showing the information that people need to see when they need to see it, like that, so that it's underlying what you're saying and it's underlying what you're talking about. It should never, to me, anything that's not moving shouldn't be up there. Like as soon as they have enough time to read it, get it out of there, and get back to you talking to them. And so when people say, well, how should I edit MacBreak? That was always a big thing, because MacBreak is a lot of this, right? It's a screen and a person talking. We cut back and forth a lot. And I said, when they're looking down, cut to the screen. When they're looking up, cut to them. It's not any harder than that. And then there's just training people, and we train people to do that. We train instructors. Don't look down and explain something. When you want to explain something, look up to the camera. And the first one is always hard to train them to do that. But when they do that, it tells our editors, just cut back and forth. When they look down like this, they're going to do something. Cut to the screen. When they look up, they're going to talk to them. And I want to see that person full screen when they look up. And that's the thing that, but getting into training people to do that well, and then cutting to that, a much better experience, I believe, for the user. John, and then Grant.
So Alex, before Benjamin was born, Microsoft had a product called Producer. Do you remember that product?
No, I didn't.
It was
use Microsoft
fantastic.
No,
You could record with the web camera on stage, up in the corner, and then on stage you had the ability to push PowerPoints or HTML, and they supported Smile. Remember that protocol from 1,000 years ago?
Yeah.
It was a fantastic product that would generate a multimedia presentation that you could send out, and they kill it off. It was very disappointing.
And we need to be creative about how we think about this, because I do believe that eventually we're going to see things like USDZ and other things in our presentation tools, and, it'll probably be Keynote first. And once Keynote has it, it'll have to be everywhere, because it's not going to, you won't be able to compete, but you'll be able to sit there and grab onto objects and rotate them around and talk about them and have annotations pop out. And I mean, we're in a brave new world where a lot of the stuff is going to be really exciting, but I think that this pip with a slide is something that is getting to be a little 70s for me. Like when I think about it, I'm just like, oh, like I need some plaid couches. Anyway, Grant.
Yeah, the tough thing, I completely agree with you. The tough thing is when we get a 10-minute presentation and they've got 70 slides, and it's just, it happens all the time with the medical, yeah. Oh,
medical.
And so you just never get a chance. You never get a chance to go to a full screen talking head, because they got constant slides.
And to their defense, their audience kind of expects it. Like they're looking forward to those slides. Like they look at them. We get comments if it's too soft and they can't read every little word. And so I'm kind of like, okay, I'm not academic enough to really get that. So it breaks all the rules.
What do you think of animation? vMix does it. All the ones do it, where you have a pip and it'll fly into the pip, fly back out to reveal, a two-shot, fly back into the.
I think it's lipstick on a pig. So I just think that it's, okay. I mean, but the product, here's the problem that I have is that all those zooms don't compress well. So you do that over top, you do all that stuff over top of it, and then you run it through a compressor and you stream it out live, and a lot of people won't see that very well. So, Zoom transitions are not something I tend not to do. My whole thing is I try not to do animations because they're cool. I try to do them because they tell a story. If there's a language that I'm using that I'm going to tell you that and you don't even know what that language is. You don't need to know what that language is. I mean, Alex can talk to that, but you don't, as a viewer, I don't want you to know what the language is, but you're subconsciously knowing that this is the kind of information I'm giving you because it slid in from the right or that it popped up from the center. There's a reason that I'm doing everything that I'm doing as I pop those things up. And I have that reason, and you'll get it over time, not consciously, but subconsciously, your brain will just go, oh, this is the extra piece of data that he's going to give me now. That's like the bonus, like a lot of stuff from on my side, from my on the right of the screen, things will pop in on my presentations. That's always bonus information. It's always like, hey, and did you know this? And then it pulls out. So there's like a little side, like a sidecar that it's not really part of the main thing, but it's a little added piece. And so there's things that I do that way. And then I do a lot of animations, or just things move around and things pop in. But they're trying to explain what I'm saying. There's very little text. There's only text where I need to put it, unless there's a quote. I don't put a lot of text on my slides. I'm giving the text. Now people say, well, I have to leave something behind. I'm like, well, build a deck. Or just better yet, go into Pages and build a document. Like, you don't have to build a deck that you're going to hand off. Build a document that looks really great, that reads really great, really well, and is outlined. That's the pretty version of the PDF that you're going to hand them. And it's just that because salespeople don't have any design skills, or, I mean, not some do, but a wide variety of them don't have the design skills or the understanding of what to do both of those things. And so they're just trying to hack it out. I get it. I get why they do it, and academics are the same way. But I think that we need to think more about having kids, for instance, in school, building more presentations, because the skill of building good videos and good presentations is probably more important than most of the other skills they're going to learn in school. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify with Grant, because I think I assume you don't want to have to do any post-processing on this, because just recording like an ISO person talking head and then cutting in the slides would, I think, on the production side of things, be a little simpler.
Yeah, cut it live.
Yeah, gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess. And yeah, I guess one of Jeff's solution would be vmix in the cloud with NDI.
That's right. Yeah, I think you could actually do the Sienna NDI processor. You could do it all in that, and you could, because you can make that bring up a little mixer, and you can do a composite, setup, and so that's intriguing to me as well.
But Benjamin.
Just real quick on the note of kids these days learning how to present well. I was taught in middle school the 6x6 rule: 6 words, 6 points. That's all you can fit. And if only more presentations learned that tool,
yeah,
it would be a different story.
That's awesome. Yeah, very good, very good. Next question.
Moving on to Justin Emanuel of Staten Island, New York, who asks, any way to get the M3U8 link of a YouTube video, both uploaded video and live stream?
I think that that's essentially what the, when you use something like Downy, I think that's essentially what it's doing, is it's fishing out the M3U8 and then pulling it down. I don't know if it gives it to you, but that's what it's doing, is it's going to find that, it's chasing that down and then pulling the segments. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, the other way to do it, which is kind of the age-old tried and true way, is you take the link and you post it into VLC, and then you load the VLC page, and and that will turn out the link.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on to Peter Wojcicki, and I'm probably messing up your last name, and I'm sorry. He's in Chicago, and he asks, Stream Deck plus Audio Hijack. How has everyone's experience been integrating Stream Deck functions with Audio Hijack for changing basic audio parameters?
Is anyone using Stream Deck with Audio Hijack? I don't know if that's... Nope. I guess we're a place that we're going to have to experiment. We don't get stumped very often.
Well, it's just a set and forget, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I think that the thing to figure out is that I don't know how whether it would work if it's in the background, or how well it works in the background. If it has calls that it'll hear in that process, because a lot of us keep Audio Hijack in the background. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a module for it or not, but the whole key with using Stream Deck with Companion is that Companion calls programs that are not in focus. So, but I'm not sure. I don't think the Stream Deck dedicated Stream Deck software does that.
And will Companion interact with Audio Hijack?
That's that again. I'm throwing out a tiny piece of information, not the whole thing. I don't know if there's an Audio Hijack module.
Right.
That being said, you could probably get one built if you just ask in the right place.
Yep, absolutely.
PM me for more details.
Jeffrey?
There are 2 ways that Stream Deck interacts. One is through the API. The second one is through hotkeys. So if Audio Hijack does any type of hotkey support, you'll be able to do something in Stream Deck. But otherwise, API could definitely build something if that's the case.
Well, but I think the problem with the hotkeys is that it has to be in the front, right? I mean, like the hotkeys may or may not work, and so that's the issue, is that Audio Hijack oftentimes sit in the background. Go ahead, Grant.
They are global. They're I can see now, like they've got time shift global hotkeys, and so you can do like pause and resume and stuff, and that's global, so it wouldn't need to be in focus.
We'll have to do some more experimentation there. Next question.
Moving on to Matt.
Oh, go ahead, Benjamin. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Just real quick. Sorry. Just real quick. It looks like Audio Hijack supports hotkey support, and it does work with the Stream Deck that way.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thanks.
Nice.
Next question.
Okay, Matt Cool, Montreal. We live, if we live stream to more than one Facebook account, are all the comments combined together, or does each account have its own session?
Go ahead, Jason.
If you're using an aggregator like Restream.io, then yes, there's a chat function, but that is part of the service. By default, no, absolutely not, because Facebook would prefer that you are only streaming in one place.
Well, you can also cross-link, but I still believe...
Sure.
So you can do the cross points within Facebook too, and that's the way Facebook would prefer you to do it, is to stream into one account and then cross point to all the other accounts. So it's one stream into the platform. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's what Facebook does is a thing called watch party. So you go on to
no. Sorry. Time out.
What are you talking?
No, cross point is you do a live stream. And that it's not a watch party. Watch party is a different thing. A cross point is you say, I'm going to stream something to this one, and then you get permission from a whole bunch of other Facebook accounts to, when I go live, it'll go live on all of those accounts at the same time. But that's not a watch party. A watch party
Yeah,
is,
no, and I get that, but my point is, if you want to do any type of cross chat from there, basically what you do is you start the video in the first one, and then you go to the next account and you do a watch party from there. What happens is all the comments that happen on that second account will actually move to the primary video feed. That's probably the only way that you can do it, but it doesn't talk back. So if somebody comments on the primary feed, it doesn't show on the secondary feed. That's the only way I can think of to do it.
Mm-hmm. There's another version of Makana that does aggregate all of them, as many accounts as you want, from Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, and all of them all at the same time. So it's just a matter of using their APIs to make that work. So you can combine like 5 Facebooks and 3 Twitter handles and 6 YouTubes, and they all just come into the same one. You still can't talk back.
But you can't talk back, right? Yeah.
No, you don't want to. I mean, you do, but not really. I mean, the bottom line is that the reason that you don't is that the security is much higher. It's really hard to build comment engines now for Facebook. We were fortunate enough when we built ours that there weren't any rules before Cambridge Analytica. So we were able to, like, I could just attach my QA system to any event going through and just grab all the comments. And so we were able to do load balancing or load testing in a way that no one can do anymore. So it's if you were back then, you could figure it out. Chris figured it out, but you can't. It's really hard to build a solid system now because of that, because of the restrictions. But talking back is really hard with all these systems because they want to keep you from doing things nefarious things. Grabbing onto the comments, you still need a fair bit of security now, more than you used to, but pushing back into the system is really hard. So and we don't bother. We really want people to, we want to get all those questions. And the bottom line is, again, as I said, I'm going to be sending it out to a bunch of platforms. I always recommend finding a platform to bring everybody to, use the other platforms to bring them there. So, and right now, if I was going to pick a public CDN that's free, I'd probably pick YouTube, as the one to bring people to, because the dwell time is higher on YouTube than all the other platforms. And so, or the average view time. So I use the other platforms. I would use the other platforms to bring it to that platform, or again, for us, we bring them to a different platform altogether. Anyway, next question.
Kyle Nesta in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania says, recommendations for a simple mixer for a live teaching studio. Studio will be staffed, 2 mics maximum, and novice operators.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'd say the Zoom, what's it called? The Zoom H6? Is it the H6? I have one. It's right over there, but I don't remember. Very, very simple interface, and good inline compression and separate multi-band recording. Plus it sums nicely into just about any source.
Go ahead, Nikki.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the H6 can actually mix though. I know it's a 6-channel interface and standalone handheld recorder, but I'm not sure if it's capable of.
It can
mixing.
mix. It can mix to a line output.
Ah, interesting. Okay, but yeah, my recommendation would be something like the Allen and Heath ZI10 or Z10i, or there's a new mixer from Behringer that's fairly friendly to non-tech savvy people, called the Behringer Flow.
And are those analog mixers?
The
Flow's
Flow,
digital.
I believe, yeah, it's digital. It's an not outboard mixer. It looks like an analog mixer, but it's actually doing the processing inside in the digital realm. But the Allen Heath one is an analog mixer, but with a 4x4 interface, if I remember correctly.
I guess all I'm gonna say is that, yeah, I just stopped using analog mixers.
Oh, I'm pre-ordering that right now.
Because the problem is that over modulation is the number one thing that I have the problem with analog mixers. Anyway, Greg and then Jeff, cheap analog mixers.
Yeah, but the thing is, for ease of use with novice operators, I think it's difficult to beat the layout of an analog mixer, because you know exactly what it's doing. you know, and you don't have to go through menus to find stuff. So, and there's tons of them out there. You know, Yamaha makes some great, you know, small count mixers. There's so many out there. It's difficult to, you know, find an actual recommendation.
If it was one, it probably makes sense. If I was going to do it to a bunch of classrooms, the big advantage that we've had with larger things where we have multiple rooms is that being able to have a brain. So like in like things like Dreamforce or some of the other things that we've worked on, Brian sits and he sees every mixer because it's digital. He sees every mixer in every room. And he can sit there and move their faders for them, even if they argue, and change compression and change mix values and change stuff. So if you're building one room, probably an analog mixer makes sense. If you're going to build a bunch of classrooms or a bunch of things and you're going to scale this, being able to have them all call home and being able to have one person that can go in there and reroute and fix things is pretty powerful. Jeff?
Yeah, in that case, I would totally agree.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
One of the things I'd watch out for on those small mixers is a lot of them have just a rotary fader, a rotary pot that is your level, and no mute buttons. And I would step up to something that has an actual mute button because that's really easy for a novice. They want to have an easy way to go in and just turn a mic on and off. That's really important. So the Behringer, there's a Xenix Q1204. I looked for somebody, and it's an analog mixer, but it has a USB output. So that was kind of the cheapest, smallest one I could find that would have several inputs with actual mute buttons.
And I have to leave a little early today because I have a big shoot and I have to pack up my room and check out. So I will be coming back in from my house tomorrow morning. But I want to thank everybody and thank new faces, Ben, and thanks for stopping in. Ben came in and didn't miss a beat. Benjamin, I'm sorry, Benjamin came in. My middle name is Benjamin, and so I grew up as Ben. So anyway, so that's why I jumped in it. But Benjamin, Benjamin didn't miss a beat, and has been adding valuable input already. So anyways, but thanks to everybody, and I'm going to drop out now. Have a good time, and hopefully I'll be able to
see you tomorrow, Alex. Take care.
Bye.
All right, moving on. I think we've taken care of that, although nobody mentioned the venerable Shure FP32 that I was using in 1970 to do this kind of stuff, and I'm disappointed at that. All right.
I have a 32A.
Yeah, you could use it
to
protect yourself as well.
Big
nice
rotary
weapon.
pots. Turn it to 4 and don't touch it. You'll be fine. Vincent Alvarez of Bellingham, Washington, been tasked to play prereq videos for a Zoom event. They asked me to use VLC and use Zoom screen share and then live Q&A. Is this the way to do it? I've been playing with vMix as a trial. If better, which version should I get? As the trial is a full version, which level should I convince them to buy? Lots of questions in there about all sorts of Zoom stuff. So which of our Zoom gurus wants to try to tackle this? Grant is slowly but surely easing his hand up. Go,
Yeah,
Grant.
that's right. So with one of Alex's classic hits is talking about the difference between screen share and the video that comes at like the camera input. And so the difference is it's a priority. So the priority over screen share is prioritizing the pixels, and so it will maximize the amount of pixels and decreases the frame rate. Whereas the camera is the opposite. It actually generally starts at 360, sometimes less if you really got a bad connection, and then would go to 720 if you have the right account or have a Zoom room connected. What it's doing though is with a good connection, you'll get 30 frames a second. So ideally, when you're playing a video out, you want to have that playing through the camera input rather than screen sharing. And so there's a few different ways of doing that. Lots of us are now using the A10 Mini because it's just so handy, to be able to just quickly jump onto something like that. I've got a computer input as well, and so then I just have a separate computer that's dedicated to that input. I play a video full screen, it comes into my camera input and looks great. You can use whatever software you want to do then. So that's a good hardware solution. You said about vMix, absolutely. And there's a whole bunch of different different versions of software that you can use to make that happen. vMix has an external output, and so it's seen as a webcam on the system, and so then you can just select that in Zoom, and now all your vMix program out is coming into Zoom, and so there's not a. I think the most basic HD version you could get vMix. If you just wanted to play a video out, then that would work fine. So that would be a good solution.
What are you using for video playback, Grant?
Well, I've got a TriCaster Mini, so just over there. So I use that, but was I muted?
No, you were fine. We're still hearing you.
Okay.
So use a TriCaster Mini. There's a bunch of feed machines, right? Virtual feed machines. Yeah,
exactly. So a TriCaster Mini is just a PC based. I mean, it's like vMix, but it's hardware specific as well. So you buy it as a complete unit. It's a dedicated piece of hardware, and so I would run videos out of that. But yeah, I've used all sorts of different things. ProPresenter is great for it. And then I've used vMix and I've used Livestream Studio as well. So I kind of use them all. But yeah, I'm loving having hardware. I'm a real convert to the ATEM, because it just is so sweet just to be able to cut. To
something nice
all
about
the
pushing
ISOs
the button and knowing it's going to roll. All right. Benjamin had his hand up, and then we're going to go to Roscoe Jones after that. Go ahead, Benjamin.
I was just going to say, A. Mitchells was asking whether the optimize for video option in screen share works as well, if that makes videos play as cleanly. I know I've been using that, and it seems to be effective if you don't have the capability of running 720p on your Zoom video feed.
Yeah, I think part of it has to do with how Zoom connects to the Zoom server central, but I might be wrong about that. Roscoe, go ahead.
Yeah, I use VLC a lot, and so it's great because it has built-in playlists. The recommendation, if you're doing multiples, is put a little black between each of your clips. Otherwise, VLC will go right to the next clip when you get to the end of it. So either build the black into the edit or put a black clip between your playlist.
Yeah, and I've had success. I know Alex is a little leery of it, and I completely understand that, but just embedding videos in Keynote and using that as the going to the next thing, hit play, it usually works. Through an ATEM, I've had difficulties, and Mickey's going to help me with that, in getting the audio out of that chain into a Zoom meeting, and I think Loopback is the tool that will take care of that, which I haven't yet invested because my fingers are crossed for Black Friday. Okay, I think we've covered that enough. It's time to move on, and we're going to Larry Littlehale of Concord, North Carolina, and he asks, would panelists share responses to recent news that Intel has closed its volumetric AR/VR studio, while NHK Japan is promoting its similar facility for use for staging traditional drama and sports? And John Pruitt immediately raised his hand. Go, John.
I just have a more of an overall comment, not specifically to that situation. That is, Intel's a dying company. It's on its way out. It isn't able to keep up with their competitors, let alone what Apple just released. They don't have a plan going forward, and I think they closed the studio not because it made sense strategically, but because they can't afford to keep it open any longer.
Ooh, that's a tough call. Jason, and then Kev. Go, Jason.
I'm going to be a little bit more kind to Intel than John, although I don't disagree with him. I would say Intel is on its track to innovate less. They are more along the lines of a Texas Instruments, over the next few years, instead of like a dead horse.
Okay.
I read about this just the other day. I think it was in Protocol or somewhere. What they were saying is the reason they're closing it down was that they were apparently supposed to make that a self-sustaining profit center to the business. And with the COVID and all the pandemic, that the productions just apparently disappeared. So it could be a cost saving, but like everybody else, I agree with you. I think it's Intel scrambling to find something to keep holding on to.
Yeah, it's bizarre to see these linchpin parts of the industry struggle as much as the smaller, less well-capitalized one we expect. Let's do John Pruitt and then Roscoe Jones after that. Go, John.
I was just going to say, once Intel seems to be big on server infrastructure lately, and once the M1 type chip or some other AMD, or not AMD, some other chip along that RISC type processor makes it into the server infrastructure in a big way, they're starting to trickle in now. Intel's business is pretty much over unless they can figure out how to get over to that type of processing. And they can't make a small 5 nanoscale process right now.
Yeah,
So
5, and I
that's,
heard they're looking at 4 for 2022 or something like that. It's
yeah.
insane, the production changeover that's happening so rapidly. Was
They're
it
starting to
Roscoe
see
next?
quantum
Oh.
effects on that level. And I don't know how they're able to control for that.
Way beyond my pay grade. Roscoe.
My thing is, who wants to keep track of all that data from 8K cameras times 10, or was it 100? Anyways, there was way too much data coming out of that place to keep track.
Well, if your phone is kicking out a 6K signal in a few years and you've got a concert somewhere and, right, you've got 1,000 people in the audience all holding up their phones, all uploading them theoretically, possibly to a central site for the band to aggregate, that's some insane amounts of data for a half-hour show, and that's going to be in our future, I would imagine. All right.
And very few people can handle it.
Yeah. Courtney, was that a hand raise or you just...
Yeah, I was just going to comment. We used to do a lot of work with a company called 8i that did volumetric video recording. And I think the problem is they just never found a market for it. And the last stuff that we did for them was like instructional videos for, linemen, doing high voltage, lines on poles, training. But other than the training, and even that was kind of an overreach. So I just don't think other than gaming, there's not really a good application for most of that. I think that's why they are finding
I could see some niches like remote surgery where the depth information, if you could map that, would be super critical.
That's certainly a very, very vertical market, so there's no money in it. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
and of course it's not volumetric either. It's AR through headsets which are worn by people in that market, like the HoloLens 2, for example, for the industrial.
I was just wondering if they ever get volumetric down to the point where it's really, really fine in terms of depth, and then adding that data into the stream for a surgeon's headset or whatever. But I don't know. This is all speculative. I guess that takes care of that one. Let's move along. We're moving to James Babbitt here in San Diego, who asks, with the new M1 MacBook Pro with fewer USB ports, how do you connect your gear? If a USB hub is needed, which hub would you recommend? And everybody's talking about the first kind of one is out from Newer, or not Newer, OWC. OWC is all over the boards and stuff like that with their 3, I think it's 1 in, 3 out new hub. Jason?
I believe it's 1 in, 4 out. And yeah, I'll put the link in. I'll put the link in Mukana. It's the only one of its kind, and even it will not be out, I believe, until next month.
Yeah, at least it's nice that the first out of the gate is a company like OSC has a reputation for very, very high quality and really well-engineered products, so that you don't end up with a lot of anomalies. I think most of us here on the panel have had experiences with getting hubs that didn't deliver particularly well. So it's nice. Let's do Mickey next. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that hub from OWC as a Thunderbolt hub and not a USB hub. I'm not entirely sure if it can also carry USB protocols, but it's market designed and marketed as a Thunderbolt hub, not a USB one.
John Pruitt and Jason both started nodding when you were saying that about some part of it. So go, John.
Yeah, I was looking at the protocol, and it says it's backwards compatible to USB 4. And be sure that whatever hub you get for the new M series are USB 4 compatible.
Okay, so that's the next one coming. Jason?
Yeah, so I don't want to get into the niceties of it. Suffice it to say, Thunderbolt 4 will work with everything. It's completely backwards compatible as far as the cable is concerned, and it is so much faster than USB-C as we conventionally know it, which is USB 3.1 Generation 2, that it actually uses the USB-C protocol as kind of a timekeeper. in order to handle the rest of the Thunderbolt. That's
So the
just to
old
give you an
pipe is now
idea.
just the clock pipe. Is that what you're telling me?
Yep, exactly.
It's amazing. All right, things keep changing, and we're moving on to the next question because actually we have 10, we have 11, we have 12 questions to deal with. People are doing well by us. This is from Benjamin, who's on the panel for the first time today. San Carlos, California. Follow up to the OS question. Suggestions for Mac OS on primary production Macs not using Pro Tools. Is Catalina a safe option? And Mickey wants to weigh in.
Yeah, read the documentation on all the software and hardware that you use, and that will guide you if Catalina would be a good option for you to jump on.
Catalina was a big watershed in that they deprecated all the 32-bit code that's still hanging out there. So if somebody hasn't rewritten or utility or modernized a utility that you depend on for 32-bit, for 64-bit clean, you could get in trouble. But Brian Maddox and then Jason Bates. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, this is just like, my old guy advice, but I have almost never regretted staying on an earlier operating system that was working fine. I have often regretted upgrading too soon. So that's just sort of a bigger answer to the question as opposed to the specifics of Catalina versus Mojave, although I'm still using Mojave on all my machines.
And I, on the other hand, oddly, have moved to Catalina very quickly. I think I did it 4 days after it came out. I had been testing because I was reading all the things that, all the 32-bit stuff. So I was going through and identifying and trying to get rid of and asking me that central question, can I live without this? And so when I made the switch, it was, I got a video out the next day after I made the switch and everything worked fine. So it's not impossible. Jason, go ahead.
There's tremendous wisdom to what Brian is saying. Absolutely. If you have a legacy that you need to preserve and you have a production chain and you have plugins and all these, things, then by all means, stick with it. That said, if you have no legacy and are asking for a new, to start anew, I think you'd be just fine.
Mickey?
And yeah, just to build on what Brian was saying, like I have a couple studios that I consult for that have consoles that are still running on, I think, Mountain Lion, just because if it works, it works. Like, don't touch it. And like apps like say Total Recall for SSL aren't updated that regularly, so they don't want to touch it because it's a system that is stable and making them money.
Yeah, Greg Curta.
Yeah, I think the only kind of pain in the butt is that every now and then you run into some process that you have to do where you need another little third-party app, and now that third-party app is no longer supported in your lower OS. So that's kind of the only gripe for me, but it's certainly much more worth it to stay with something. I mean, that's the Hollywood theory. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So.
Yeah, I'm not pushing back. Look, if money is on the line and you've got clients and you do not want to lose a client by failing, and that is a huge thing, particularly if you're paying for the house and the kids' education and everything. This is incredibly smart to think before you jump. But there's also another side of it, which is this is probably the fastest moving technical industry on the planet right now, everything that we do. And if you don't dip your toes into some of these processes, you don't find things that could accelerate your productivity in a substantial way and give you a leg up as the next set of professionals coming in. So there's always a tension. I think there always has to be a balance between it works, I don't want to mess with it, to, oh my gosh, they've all moved on and I'm still here in the it works, don't mess with it world. That can be a danger too. So let's do Courtney and then Greg.
Yeah, I've always gone by the rule that if you can afford it, upgrade a new piece of hardware with the new operating system. So, and then just start afresh on that, and then try and migrate your regular tools to the new one and see what works and see what doesn't work, while keeping your old system intact and doing most of your work there. And so that way you can see how you're going to do and whether the stuff, all the old stuff will work on the new platform. The only problem you're going to run into is licensing issues. If you have to pay for another license for a second seat or something, that could be a problem. Or if you want to move it off of one onto the other, you can't keep the other one going. So
yeah, I just
if you can
remember when the
afford
tower
to,
computer I was running my editing on, my laptop was the only one with the new enough chip to run Final Cut 10 when it first came out. So I literally learned it on my laptop because it could run it. And then I started to go, wait a second, I'm getting things done faster than I do on my big system back here, just because the new one had been written more modernly. And so I was pulled entirely out of one class of computers into another class of computers by an accident. If that software had run on my tower, I would have stayed on my tower, and I would never have understood that laptops were catching up real fast. Greg?
Yeah, I was gonna. Courtney pretty much said it all, but if I had the wherewithal to have two, I don't have the wherewithal currently to have two computer setups, but I would just keep the Pro Tools on the lower version and do everything else. Because I think there's some phenomenal progress being made in that.
Yeah,
in
it's a
computer
tough
area,
tension.
so.
And it's not going away. It's going to get worse, I think, rather than better as this development keeps going. All right, I think we beat that a little bit to death. So let's move on to Philip Olders of Katona, New York's question. Was recording a 3-hour event with my ATEM ISO. The recorded files were split into 2. Is this a setting or function of how the SSD is formatted? Jason?
The short answer is yes. If you're not formatting in Mac OS, then your files will automatically be capped at the default recording size.
And is that the 32-bit run into the barrier and it splits into 2 files automatically? We used to
I want to say it's 4 gig, but that's
4 gig.
wrong.
Yeah,
Somebody else is going to know.
Yeah. Let's do Mickey and then Courtney.
Yeah, can't the ATEM ISO recognize exFAT drives? Because that would get over that FAT32 4 gig hump.
Yeah, that used to be the problem. If you had your original disk formatted in FAT32, it would stop at when it got to a certain degree, 4 gigs, and then span. Benjamin?
Yeah, the ATEM, I was just looking it up real quick. The ATEM Mini Pro ISO does support exFAT and HDFS. So an easy solution would just be reformat your drive. Take your media off first, but reformat your drive, and that should help out.
And read up a little bit on what the different formats when you format a drive mean and what the downsides and the upsides are, because sometimes you can format a drive in OS X extended on the Mac and you try to take it over and give a file to somebody on a PC and they're going to go, I don't get this. Courtney and then John Pruitt and then Mickey.
Yeah, the other format that is, I don't know if, I'm not really sure if the ISO supports it, but NTFS does not have a file size limit problem that it runs into.
No, doesn't support NTFS.
Oh, too bad.
John Pruitt?
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things I noticed while playing around with file drive partitioning is to be very careful how you partition it, because sometimes your computer can't read it once you repartition it.
That would not be good, would it?
No. So I recommend trying it on a different drive, not on a production drive, until you get something stable that works repeatedly.
And if your computer can't read it, how do you reformat it? Do you have to take it out in the backyard with a big
you can
Alnico
reformat
magnet?
it. You can reformat it. You just can't use it with that computer, even though it wrote it. I don't understand how that worked. That was on Windows.
Mickey, did you want to get in on this?
Yeah, I wonder though, like, I know there's some hard pieces of hardware out there that even if the media is formatted to a file system that is capable of holding files larger than 4 gigs, they will still record and save files. It'll still keep that 4 gig limit just for compatibility reasons. So that's, I don't know for certain, like with the ATEM Mini ISO, but that's also something to look into.
Courtney has a thought. Oops.
Come on, mute. Yeah, that is a problem. If you're planning on, although you may be using it within that operating system, you may want to transfer files to somebody else who's on a different operating system. And your safest way is to observe the 4 gig limit, because you may find that files over that size either won't transfer, or they could transfer, but then they can't open them. So and usually the ones that divide it, and ISO probably does this as well, divides it. There's nothing missing. You just piece them back together in a timeline, and everything's there. But it also serves to prevent haphazard loss of a huge project. That way, if there's a file write error or something, you only lose a segment and not your whole entire show. So
bad end of file is not a good thing.
Yeah, it is a safety issue too.
Okay, I think we're going to move on because we actually still have 12 things for the next half hour, and I'm gonna zip the Keenan Camel here in Princeton, Illinois, setting up my home office for remote use. I have a Blackmagic Design 6K and an ATEM Pro, thanks to Guy Cochran. But I'm wondering about backdrops. I see the CNN kitchen backdrops and hear what Alex always says about taking away from the talent. What do you recommend for backdrops and colors? This is an interesting aesthetic thing, because we've had so many different things here. I know when I first logged in here, I did from my voice booth, and I think people really enjoyed, me being in my voice booth. But at some point, I realized that meant that I had to sit in a box for 3 hours every day out in a separate building, and I would never see or hear my wife and or my dog, and I didn't like that. So I created this in a back bedroom so that I could literally have a place I could just walk to, close the door, and still interact with the family. For people who are doing backdrops and things like that, how do you feel about the neutral gray versus all the rest of the things? Anybody sold on one or another? John Pruitt? And it's
sorry,
that's okay.
Sometimes it takes me a minute to find my mouse cursor. I went with the tobacco smoke for 2 reasons. One, it was available in the Last Light 6x7 when the gray wasn't, but I also thought it would be more flexible for me, as I do headshots occasionally for people, and I figured that while the gray was nice, people would prefer a more traditional type background color. And then I've got the color light, which I turn it on and off from my phone, and that has given me some flexibility so that I can make the colors come and go as I need to. So you can see here, this is with the backlight, one of my backlights off, and then I turn it back on, and it changes the total tone of what I'm doing.
I wonder if you would be, if it would be interesting for you to do an experiment where, because brown and blue are pretty far apart on the color wheel. They're not really all that complementary. They can be used together, certainly. But I'm wondering if you thought about greens or things like that, something that's closer to complementary on a color wheel. It might end up looking more pleasing. I'm not saying it would.
I found orange works very well, but blue's sort of the corporate color, so that's what I went with.
Well, then there you have the one of the things about these neutral gray backgrounds is that they take all sorts of colors pretty equally. They don't have a tonality themselves, so you can apply whatever you want to it. I think we've pretty much killed this one, so let's move on to Philip Oler of Contola, New York. I need a rock-solid internet solution for remote guests. Recently worked on a production with everyone on wired internet and still had intermittent issues with audio and video quality in Teams. Would a bonded cellular solution be more solid than relying on people's ISPs? The great conundrum of trying to get everybody to do production remotely. Let's start with Jason.
There is no such thing as a rock-solid bonded cellular solution. There is no such thing, just no. I'll leave it at that.
John Preto?
I bet you what was going on with people were having CPU issues, more so with Zoom, because it consumes some CPU. If you don't have horsepower, it's going to choke.
Brian Maddox?
Yeah, and on the last project I was working with a guy named Alex, you may know him, is we were doing a lot of speaker prep ahead of time and a lot of pre-records and problems that manifested themselves as internet problems, stuttering, all kinds of different things. And we would step through all these different, inevitably, in fact, it got to the point where the audio guy got on the comms and said, whispered in somebody's ear, have we asked them to reboot their computer? And sure enough, it was amazing how many times rebooting the computer, which of course shut off the 47 apps they had going in the background and whatever else nonsense was going on that they didn't realize. Like, I mean, I don't want to say it was 100% effective, but I honestly, my memory is telling me it was like 100% effective. So obviously, internet issues happen, but it's amazing. It's remarkable, especially when you're dealing with non-technical talent. They just open up Zoom on top of the 48 things that they've had open.
They got word processors, they got graphics programs, they've got all this stuff eating up RAM, and then they open Zoom in the last 256 megabytes of space.
Right. And you can't really ask them to turn off their applications because they really don't know what that means. Or sometimes it's not effective. It's just, doesn't really clear everything out. And so, we just found it's like, let's just skip. It's like, oh, it's stuttering. Let's just skip to the end and let's just reboot the computer, let it restart, let it find the cleanest possible Wi-Fi signal, because I know you don't have a hard wire to wire in like I want you to. And it was remarkable how often that was actually the problem.
There's some wisdom. Stephen Kimbrough?
Yeah, our corporate thing is 20 minutes before you're on, reboot. Period, the end. And we could go out and check the reboot time. And if they didn't, we'll do it remotely. And they wonder why their system crashed.
Yeah,
but we've never had a problem.
How many fishhook programs I have that grab memory and will not give it up for anything. And, beyond a cold restart, it's going to keep that going. Courtney, go ahead.
I'm talking to you on Wi-Fi right now because this is a Dell machine, Windows computer, but on Ethernet, it's got gigabit Ethernet connection, and I have a gigabit Ethernet, but I had to disable it because there's some buffering problem with the drivers and Zoom, and it would just stutter all the time. I disabled it and went to Wi-Fi, and I don't have any problems. The other thing I want to suggest is if you're on a Windows machine, Windows 10 has a nasty habit of downloading updates in the background and doesn't ask you. It won't install them until you tell it if you have active hours turned on. But if you tell it, go into Windows Update and tell it that you're on a metered connection, then it will not download until you tell it to you tell it it's okay to download because it thinks you're on a cellular connection. And that'll keep it from doing stuff in the background. And when it starts downloading, it's shoving stuff onto your hard drive, which creates interrupts that preclude internet connection, and you run out of buffer space pretty quickly if it's doing that, downloading a feature update in the middle of your Zoom call.
Cool.
So
let's finish up with John Preto, and then we're down to 10 questions.
The other big killer is Dropbox and Google Drive synchronization.
Dropbox. Unfishhooking Dropbox took me 2 days. And that's why I don't use it anymore. And so, okay, moving on, we're down to Tyler Roberts of Chambersburg. How can you add a few milliseconds of audio delay to an SDI? We have a stream slip into another venue with frame sync. Audio is ahead of video. Video is over SDI into a Ross Ultra switcher. The Ultra can't currently do it. We have a Yamaha M7 and can't add delay on the input there. And thankfully, Brian raised his hand, and Mickey's right after him.
No, I get this one. Mickey, stand down. This is an old guy console, so this is one I can answer really easily. So on the M7, the trick with the M7 is you can insert a rack processor in the input. And basically use the mono delay rack processor, set the feedback to 0, and it just acts as a delay. So that's the quick and dirty way. There's another way to do it that's a little more complicated. In the chat on Mukana, I am going to paste the exact verbiage from Yamaha on how to do both of those.
Excellent. Mickey, you can now add some more additional wisdom because everybody has different wisdoms.
Yeah, I'm wondering because I've played with the if is this the M7CL? Because if it is, you should be able to add delay to the output instead of the input, and cheat it essentially how you would add delay to a delay tower, for example. And that should be a fairly straightforward process if you want to add delay to the entire mix. Let me know, Brian, what you think of that.
No, that's 100% true. All the outports also have delay on them, because the questioner was specifically talking about. Yeah, I was thinking that it was we're trying to align multiple inputs together and send them all out the same output. In which case, of course, an output delay would get the one input correct and throw the other inputs off. But yeah, using that outport delay is Yamaha's other way. You can actually use the outport delay as an insert point. Anyway, it's a little bit complicated in how it works, but they literally have a little paragraph blurb of do this and it'll work.
Nice. Okay, so there's your answer. Moving along to Laura Seal. Hi, Laura of Greensboro, who was at the Creative Summit, and you should slip on the panel sometime. She asked about the 8-inch Facebook portals, which are sold out everywhere. She notes the Portal Plus has better speaker and camera and HDMI out, but it eats desktop real estate. Are the camera and mic good enough for actual use aside from family calls? Can it also function as an external monitor, web browsing, general tablet, or other uses? And Guy has spotlighted himself because I think he knows exactly how to deal with this question.
Yeah, this will be wild because now I'm talking into this one, but spotlit on that one. So Laura, you can kind of see the picture quality of this one. The camera is much bigger. The physical size of this camera on the Portal Plus is like the size of a nickel, whereas the one that's on the little Portal is much smaller. So I have the little one right here, which I guess I could fire up both, but this little camera is super tiny. So the picture quality on that one I would say is not good enough, but this one is, and I think you can you can zoom in while you're on the call. So let me.
You have gone way out of sync, so you definitely.
I'm going to be way out of sync. Well, okay, let's do this. Let's unmute this microphone. All right, so now you're hearing. Well, now I got the echo. Sorry, now you're hearing me on the Facebook portal. This is the microphone inside of a Facebook portal. There's actually two microphones. This is the back microphone. Now I'm going to switch to the bottom microphone. Maybe you'll hear a difference between the two microphones. And now it's doing its thing where it's looking for me. And you can actually do camera control where you can focus on me, or you can do zoom in. So you can frame it up. So it's kind of cool.
These are cool devices. So I think these are going to probably sell out pretty quick this holiday. This may be the next big holiday thing, just because Zoom is important for everybody. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yep. I actually got this tip this morning. B&H, go there now, buy them. They're still on sale at the low price.
There you go.
B&H. All
right.
Sorry,
Preddo,
I would rather go to you.
Every
John
time I
Preddo
buy something on black whatever, within the next 30 days, the next generation comes out that has all the cool features on it, right?
Well, yeah, that kind of feature creep and always thinking, gosh, I should have bought the next one. That's never going to stop in your life from now on. Peter Moore, go ahead.
So do you have to log into Facebook to use these?
There's two ways to log in. One is with Facebook. The other one is with WhatsApp.
So yes, basically, because they're both Facebook operatives.
Yeah, I think for the base, but they also do apps. You can download Zoom onto your portal and run that as your.
But you have to have one of the two logins to be able to download the apps.
Okay, so it's the initial gatekeeper thing. You have to have one of those two. Okay, great. All right, let me get my view back. Hit answered from Laura's question, and we're now going to James Babbitt from here in San Diego. Please comment on code switching, where we're appearing with a professional look in professional meetings and with a more casual look in other Zoom meetings. Code switching. I haven't heard it referred to as that. John Pruitt and then Benjamin after that. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, this particular question kind of appeals to me because I have a degree in anthropology. And code switching is more commonly used when people of different backgrounds switch into different contexts depending on what their what the scenario is. For instance, it's often used a lot with African Americans dealing in one language when they're in the office and a different language when they're home laying back with their friends. I think that it's natural, it's human, it makes sense to do code switching. When I'm working with my team, I'm using different language, I'm using different body language. When I'm working with my CISO or some of the other what we call L4s, which are the directors, then I've got a different language. I'm more formal. English has a formal and an informal. A lot of other languages have it more structured, but we've always had it. We talked yesterday, I think, about the different accents in various parts of England, and there's also, when I'm talking to you, I use a more Midwestern style. I don't think anybody would mostly recognize them as a native Southerner. But when I'm talking to my friends down here, some of them have a very Southern drawl, and I start picking it up and start talking a little bit more like this, and I get more comfortable with this. And I find that I slip into that kind of thing to unconsciously, subconsciously, and I think it's just something we do as people. So code switching is something that fascinates me from my anthropological background, and I think it's a good thing to recognize, but not to, I think do it. I think really do it. Lean in.
I love that response. Thank you very much, John. I learned a lot there. Kev Brewer and then Stephen Kimbrough.
Yeah, this code switching, it's just a label. It's what we all do. We interact with each other at every level, from the shopkeeper to a CEO or general public. It's, you just, if you want to draw somebody into your program or get a story out of people, then you've got to, in a sense, empathize at the level that they're at. You can't start saying, oh, tell me how you feel after your death of your 5 kids, and expect them to come back with, well, actually, it was a bit like this. No, you've got emotion, you've got grief, and too often those kind of human aspects of us get completely destroyed in our media. We are reduced to words, numbers, weights, heights, ages. We've already been commodified already by social media, and I'm afraid that is at the expense of genuine humanity and just connecting, whether it's through the internet or face to face. And given what we're doing through 2020, that is particularly noticeable at this time.
Stephen Kimbrough.
And it's like with the tech teams, I look like this. When I talk to the group directors, I have a coat, a shirt, and a tie that I'm in about 5 minutes. I don't use the headset. I use, the normal little mic and look very professional, mainly because that's what they pay for.
Yeah.
Come on, we got to see it now, Stephen. Go, well, take 5 and go run, and let's see this quick change Superman thing.
Benjamin, dive in on this.
I'll just put it out there. I think it's a very interesting thing. I think it's totally something I'm aware of, right? I put on a clean shirt today, and I fixed up my background because I came here. But I go to school with this same setup, and I see my friends who roll out of bed and just join their Zoom meetings. I think it's about expectations and how you want to be perceived.
Yeah, it is very true. On set, if I go in and I need to talk to crew, I'm in a black t-shirt. Why? Because that's stage black, and everybody understands that, and they see you walking into the thing and go, I can talk to him. And if I'm in a CEO meeting, I am not dressed that way. It used to be it would coat and tie. That is in large part in the executive suites in the last 5 or 10 years. It has migrated more toward business casual, at least here in the West and the Southwest where I've always worked. I think it's still more formal on the East Coast and in other areas. But you have to know what the expectations are. And if you meet the expectations, then you will feel comfortable, and so will the person across the desk from you feel more comfortable talking to you. I've always found that. Good question, though. Excellent question, James. Moving along to the next one, Jason Panks of Nashville says, I have a host in the UK who says the Polson ESM2 is more expensive over there. They did get the TechRise USB adapter. Are there any good replacements? He's specifically looking at the Samsung DE50X or something from Suji Tech. And I think when I've looked at the ones that we got earlier, yeah, there has been a run on these things, and it's harder and harder to find them. Kev, have you found useful?
Well, it's just the Sugitech is one I actually used because, as you rightly said, it was more expensive to use the Pulsar over here if you could get one. But it's very, very fragile. It's not really for daily work, to be honest with you, because I think I used it here for 10 days, and by the end of it, it just fractured at the end and lost the connection. So I'm back on a decent condenser now.
Yeah, that's one of the things. A $9 mic is its thing, is a thing, but it's not going to last you the rest of your career.
No, and if you're trying to do this kind of thing on a day-to-day basis, I think it's a little bit more substantial.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I think we probably took care of that. Let's move on to Greg Yotes of Gridley, Kansas. Anyone using VMware Server to host Pro Tools so they're accessible by multiple workstations? So distributed Pro Toolsing. Who does that? Anybody do that? Not out of this group? Mickey's hesitantly raising his hand.
Yeah, I would imagine like it might work, but you can't trust sync. If ever you have to do work that relies on sync, then having Pro Tools on a remote virtualized machine that you're accessing remotely might not work out well.
Okay, we got 5 minutes and 6 questions, 10 minutes and 6 questions. So we're going to keep them around a minute apiece. The next one is from John Pruitt of Huntersville again. And any remote camera control software for a Canon Vixia HF G21. I don't know about that particular model. I think I've got the 20 as my, oops, I'm not even seeing it, so it must not be on up there. And I don't have any camera control on that at all, but I understand that there's a remote control or some capability of the next higher levels. So I think it's where in the Vixia line you buy. Jason, you have any more wisdom about that?
I believe that so Canon's remote controls, their IR remote controls use a universal standard. I've used the same remote controls on cameras that, go from $5,000 to $200, and I find that they work pretty much along the entire line. So I would check into that.
John, it was your question.
Yeah, I was more thinking about software because I wanted to control it from my Mac as opposed to a little remote control. I just don't have the fine-grained controls with the remote control, with the wireless, with the IR.
No, you're right. Not going to happen. Sorry.
Yeah.
I've tried.
Nope.
That was like those inexpensive pan and tilt heads I used to try to use with camcorders, and it was like I can get it within 5 degrees of arc. I can't really do more than that, and that's not real good for a long lens. Moving on to Ken Jones of Seattle. Are we jumping at the camera deal Jeffrey Powers mentioned? I hope not, because I'm busy right now and I can't order anything. Guy is holding up the larger portal,
Oh, sorry. I was just trying to show this to Brian because he was asking which one I would get. And I was just saying that I'd use this one more because it's got this little handle in the back too. So you can carry it. So the kids actually will take this to their room and they'll do Sunday school from it. And then, of course, the cool thing is that you can turn the screen. So depending on if you want to do portrait mode, but yeah. Cool device.
And that's about $225 retail. Is that what I remember?
Yeah, I mean, I paid full price for it a while back, and so getting it on the holiday deal is a pretty good price, I think, for what it is.
Moving on to Jason Base's question, and Jason says, when Canon came out with the D80, they designed a special 18 to 35 zoom lens that had a special power zoom adapter. Any chance this combination might work with the Blackmagic 6K camera for switcher control? I'm guessing not due to the PZE1 interface. Has anybody tried using a Canon lens, a Canon lens on a Blackmagic cinema camera and gotten control success with that? Not out of this group, it looks like. So I think we're a little too specialized to have anybody with experience with that direct combination. Sorry, maybe come back in and try the question earlier and see, Jason, if we can find somebody who's actually touched that combination.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid a $4,000 lens. What can I say?
Yeah, I'm shocked. You don't want to go buy more glass, particularly because you can only use with this rig, with this adapter. Those are always the fun purchases. moving to Eric Hall of Mount Vernon, Washington. I have been noticing me super soft focus with my manual lens. What's a reasonably priced E-mount lens that can autofocus? He's looking for f2.8, 1635-ish range. This camera is a Sony a7R III. Is that full frame? Yeah, I think the Sony A7s are full frame.
Yeah, it's full frame.
So it's 1635. If that's what he needs, that's what he needs. It's not crop factored or anything else in there. I will say aperture and depth of field, how fast a lens, f2.8, that's pretty fast. So, you know, we got problems. I'm using a Canon 1635 right now, L-glass lens, but I'm probably out of focus, probably okay there, but I get too close and I go real soft because my depth of field is relatively insignificant because I don't want to be baking under a lot of light to get a smaller aperture to get better depth of field. Kev, go ahead.
Just a quick one. I was wondering whether there's a back focus problem there, if that lens is capable of being refocused at the back. I'm not familiar with that particular lens, but usually I check both sides, focusing if you're changing lenses, just in case.
Jason.
My understanding of mirrorless cameras is that they almost never have a back focus problem. Can someone correct me on that?
No, I would think that the plane between where the lens attaches will never move, and it's always going to be completely fixed. And so you don't have the floppy mirror thing happening there that can shake things around and the way true SLRs used to work. Guy?
It would depend on the lens. Like I have a Fujinon 18-55 it's like a $4,000 lens, but it has, I've converted it from an E-mount to a micro four thirds, and it has back focus adjustments, so it's still relevant. It just depends on what lens you're using. So when you get into these higher end cine lenses, they have the back focus adjustments, but the little guys, I mean, they're so dang tiny.
Yeah. And then, you know, on all the broadcasts, the B4 lenses and the rest of those, setting back focus was a weekly thing generally, just to make sure everything was tack sharp. That's why you have those charts with the little pie things that meet at the bottom. You're trying to set a very precise focus on something at a particular focal length. All right, I think we've taken care of that. How are we doing time-wise? 4 minutes, 2 questions. We have a luxurious 2 minutes per question now. Ranjan Shandil of Los Angeles is in for the first one. For PC users, what video card and chip would you buy today if you were building out a new PC? Ooh, this should be exciting for the PC people. Jason, go for it.
I'd say the 2060, unless you want to spend stupid money.
But what if somebody does want to spend stupid money? Where should they go?
Oh, come on. That's easy. The 2080.
Simple. Anybody else has? Well, gosh, we're going to get a lot of time for our last question. John Pruitt will jump in on this. Go ahead, John.
I think NVIDIA just released their 3000 series, and I would look at the 3080 instead. That way,
$2,000 card, mind you.
You didn't say reasonable. You said insane. And if you're going for longevity, go for the 3000 series. If you're going for bang for buck, the 2000 series.
Makes sense.
Note that's RTX.
Okay. I think we've dealt with that successfully. So we move to, no, it's not the last question because somebody tossed in a last one in the other, but that's right after Dave Note of Charlotte, North Carolina says, Facebook Portal or HuddleCam HD. So let's deal with the hardware that very few people have hands-on experience with against another hardware piece that probably not a ton of people have a ton of hands-on. Go ahead, John Pruitt.
I think it really depends on what your goal is. If you're looking for a more multi-purpose device, you want to get the Facebook Portal. If you want a better camera and more remote control for the camera, go for the HuddleCam. It just really depends on your use case.
Fair enough. Paul Wallace has his hand up in the bottom. Go ahead.
Okay, so let me see if I can show you the HuddleCam. Guy can show you the HuddleCam, but so can I. That is the HuddleCam, and it's got a nice zoom in and out. It has a lot of controls, so you got to be adept at knowing all the settings, right, Guy? Because there's a ton of them.
So if
And
we
then-
didn't have
You've got a lot of control.
two new
Like you're a little
questions.
hot on that one. I would probably take the exposure down and
Yeah.
then push in a little bit. And then of course you've got lens distortion control, you've got saturation, you've got all the normal things, but those are in the remote. So you have to actually do that, or you have to go in through some kind of app to
And then
get the
this
fine
is
tuning.
this is the portal. This is the portal TV, and this is another view of another portal TV. And so I've got.
If we
two
had lots of
portal
time, I would have Guy
TVs.
controlling
Portals
all
are
these
coming out of our
cameras.
ears, don't we, Guy?
That's Paul's second hour. What's in his room?
Paul's out
Okay.
of control, man.
I was way ahead. Now I'm behind. I've got 2 questions and they look pretty interesting. John, hurry up and say something or we're going to go too far over.
Dave, no, you have enough toys. You don't need anything new.
Moving on to Benjamin here in the first time. Jeffrey Powers posted this camera. Should people jump on it? Are panelists a fan of this sort of camera? And it's something off of Amazon. There's a link there if anybody who's in the panel and has links live into a web browser wants to look at it and give us a rating idea. Roscoe, have you seen it?
Yeah, it looks like the Mocos, and I know that some people the Mocos weren't holding good color, but I don't know. This specific camera doesn't have a brand on it.
Yeah, I would say that, you got main manufacturers and their reputation depends on putting out high quality stuff all the time. And then you've got these offshore companies who seem to pop up with weird names that are just like they threw a bunch of alphabet Scrabble tiles into a box and picked 6 at random, and that's what we're calling our camera. And, some of them seem to have stood the test of time. Others have definitely not. So I don't think anybody knows beyond that. But
Well, that link
Benjamin?
is currently unavailable as a price and an item. And actually, when you start reading through about the item, the English is a bit weird. Do you know what I'm saying? Very
And the last
weird.
one is actually Roscoe asking Benjamin specifically, how do you feel after your first panel here at Office Hours? You've done remarkably well, sir.
Gee, thanks. This is really quite lovely, and I really appreciate all of you. This is a great community, and I feel at home already. It's just lovely.
Nice
Thanks so
to
much
have
for
you
having
here,
me.
and I'm glad you got the gumption, old word, to join this crazy old group. And we highly recommend for anybody out there who's sitting at home thinking, yeah, I do have expertise, but I don't know if I want to go through the mic checks and the rest of that, and will I do okay? We all suffered that little bit of stage fright the first time. Even those of us who have been in the business for a long, long time and have done a lot of stuff, you're kind of introducing yourself. It's like going to a party you've never been to with a group you've never been to before, and how you navigate your first handshakes and your first saying hello to people. But, we do encourage more voices. One of the things that Alex has said from the beginning is that the more perspectives, the more voices we have, the stronger the group as a whole gets. So we entirely encourage people to come in. We've made it to the top of the hour. I'm 2 seconds over on this, so it's time to say goodbye for another day. We will be back tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us for Office Hours, and see you tomorrow.
Great job, Bill.
Thank you.
Bye, Benjamin. Thanks for coming.
See ya. This has been lovely. It's been great being on Thanksgiving break, but at one point I'm gonna have to go back to school. Ugh.
Great show, guys. Hey,
See you
we're
guys.
here on the
We're
weekends.
around at the weekends.
That's
Yeah,
true.
That's
true.
where
I'll see if I can join on
usually-
Saturdays.
I usually work during the week, and I join